as our speaker.
Oh.
So we're really pleased to have Mark here. There's a brand new alliance. I talked at some time in the past about all the different fellowships the Rotary has. One of them is the International Fellowship of Flying Rotarians. And Flying Rotarians and Air Care Alliance have joined in the last month or two. So Mark is a native of the state of Maine and currently resides near Boston, Massachusetts. He's a retired serial entrepreneur in technology and service supply chain industry segments. He's also a member of the Rotary E-Club of Aviation based in Scotland. And he's also a member of the International Fellowship of Flying Rotarians. He has been a very active volunteer pilot since 2012, having flown or donated 400 plus hours of missions. And he has taken over 700 passengers, over 200,000 miles. He is joining us today to talk about the partnership between Air Care Alliance and the Flying Rotarian Fellowship. So let's give a warm Milwaukee welcome to Mark Hansen. Mark.
You start the slideshow. Great, thank you everyone for letting me participate via Zoom. This is really great. You guys have a great club, it looks like. We're just beginning to give presentations. You're the 5th in the country to receive the presentation. So thank you for letting us do that. We would definitely like your feedback. The goal is to roll this out to all Rotary clubs in the US and raise awareness. I only joined Rotary Club last fall after meeting a pilot that was in the fellowship, and I was immediately drawn to the sense of service that the organization has. It's just amazing. So, simple start here. What do you think everybody here has in common? So, every one of these flights has been done by a Rotarian. So, and these have been all donated, all the cost of doing the flights, everything. And there's different types of donations that have been made. And we'll go over some of that today. So one of the things that people aren't aware of is that medical care isn't always around the corner. That's arguably the second largest barrier to getting appropriate medical care in the US today. So here are some examples. Someone needs to get 800 miles. Pets need to get from a kill center to a place of adopted care. Liver transplants, nearest hospital 100 miles away. Wounded veterans, engineered veterans going to various rehabilitation clinics and camps across the US. Cancer trials and medical trials in general are typically not around the corner. And burn patients, I'm not sure if you know that or not, but kids in particular, skin grafts don't grow with the child. So they're in a constant cycle of getting skin grafts, and typically they can't do that close to home. So I'll do a couple of quick short videos here. That's one example, and whoops, sorry, go down. there's a lot of different ways that you can volunteer in the aviation space, and that was just a couple of the examples. And one of the things that drew me to the Fellowship of Flying Rotarians is that they are very active. There's 1,100 members around the world, and they're very active about so started in 1965, if you're curious. They're one of the early fellowships. They really stress service. We have once a month meetings over not only aviation topics, but how we can be doing more with aviation. And we have pilots and non-pilot members. Anyone that's enthusiastic about aviation is welcome to join. And we have some really interesting speakers. We've had SR-71 pilots. We've had Redbird, red tail pilots. We don't know what those are. And in general, it's a fun group of people. And then now we've been doing a lot of focus on medical care access, which is obviously a polio topic. So Air Care Alliance, of which I joined the board about 3 years ago, volunteer public flying organizations in the US. There's about 100 of them. And they're spread across the USA. They're known in various names. There's a lot of flight organizations. There's Pilots and Paws that flies a lot of rescue animals. There's disaster recovery, like for Houston or Puerto Rico. There's education-oriented groups like STEM Flights. There's Turtles Fly Too, which is always a fun one to talk about. Every year, cold-soaked turtles wash up on the beaches in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and we end up flying them to warmer waters in South Carolina or Florida. So it's fun to fill up your plane with turtles. So Air Care Alliance has become a national contact for people requesting a flight, pilots and non-pilots wanting to volunteer, and there's various ways to do that. And helping new organizations get started if someone's passionate about using aviation for a nonprofit cause. The Air Care Alliance doesn't actually do any of the flights. We're just facilitating getting to the right organization. There's a kind of a staggering number that 35 million Americans don't live close to the type of care that they need. And I'm not sure if you know the current trend, but the current trend is not to build out rural hospitals. The current trend is to make them more of a triage center and refer them to a more major medical center for care, which usually means long transportation and logistic challenges. Same applies to veterans. They usually have to travel a fair distance to get the support they need. So the volunteer pilots and public benefit flying facilitate that. So how it works. Obviously, they need to know that the services exist. And that's one of the biggest challenges is how do we get the message out that, hey, you can travel. That little baby you saw in the video had done 7 trips to Boston with an 8-hour drive each way, and then just happened to find out through a social worker that free flights were available. So on a Tuesday, we got a call to do the flight, and on a Wednesday, I flew them. So, it's one of those things where getting awareness out into the community of these kind of volunteer services is a big factor, and that is all dependent on non-pilot volunteers. So once they discover that, if they come to the Air Care Alliance website, they can fill out a form, and the Air Care Alliance website will refer their flight request to the appropriate regional facility. And there's not facility, excuse me, organization. Again, there's organizations all across the US. So we find the best fit. The local organization validates eligibility. We're not an air ambulance because we have private pilots doing these flights, and we don't want them to be in a must fly situation. So once they're approved, their mission request is scheduled. And then pilots have their opportunity to look at available flights, sign up for them, and so do Earth Angels or Earth pilots that will get them to and from an airport. And we can use any airport. We can use major airports like Minneapolis, or we can use local, airports that maybe have 10 airplanes based with them. And that's the other advantage of the types of airplanes we're using. And then they can repeat the process as many times as they need. A lot of times, cancer patients have to go every week, every other week for chemo. And obviously, as the example I gave before, burn patients have to go, especially children, sometimes once or twice a month for grafting. And we'll just do those. In fact, today after this call, I'm driving to the airport and flying a breast cancer woman done in downtown Boston. And it's working. They've given her, they've said her tumor is shrunk 90%. So providing this service allows her to still work and not lose medical coverage, and use, because we'll fly her back and forth the same day or day. So all the major medical facilities are involved, but it's still important to get the word out because staff at these facilities aren't always, the same staff, and they turn over and they're not aware. And the flights we do very few flights that go across the entire country that are where we give away free commercial airline tickets. But a lot of the people are in have challenges and can't fly commercially. So again, just about everyone major, you can see it's not just medical. There's a lot of entities like Boys and Girls Clubs that provide kids that are underprivileged the opportunity to explore aviation careers. I also fly for some of those organizations. So just to give you an idea, just in 2022, there were 34,000 free flights given. Many passengers. It's surprising how many animals we serve, but there's a lot of animals. Everything from snakes to wolves to dogs and cats and turtles. We have a lot of volunteer pilots. But if you look at that 35 million Americans that don't have access to local care, you can see there's a lot of opportunity for growth. We typically don't have a shortage of available pilots. We have more of a shortage of available flights. So again, that's where you all could be a big impact. We also do conservation work, which is, for example, Whitehawk. They may want to survey watershed or go out and survey herds of elk, for example. So last year alone, we flew over 3 million miles. The pilots donate all the costs. We donate the cost of operating our airplanes. Last year, that was not a small number that we all provided. And we still are able to collect a lot of money to help the organizations that facilitate this and have them involved. So the type of outreach that we need help with is just letting friends and relatives know that the program exists. The very, very first Rotary Club presentation was made here in Braintree, Massachusetts. Literally 10 minutes after I finished, we got a request from one of the members to help their niece in Arizona. That afternoon, we had her signed up for her first flight. So impact can be, very, very fast. And then rural medical facilities often don't know about the service. Or anyway, you can spread the word about the service is great. Also, there's a lot of those. Some of those organizations have regional chapters. But again, anything that you may have as a thought about spreading the word about available resources. Same for veterans support groups and animal shelters. And once you start doing this as a volunteer, it's very effective. It's amazing the people you meet. So here's what happens in the Air Care Alliance. If you're curious, if you go in and look at the directory of groups, you type in the state that you're interested in. I looked up Wisconsin this morning, and here's an example of organizations that serve Wisconsin. So if you wanted to volunteer, you could fill out a volunteer application on our site at Air Care Alliance, or you could go to one of these organizations and say, hey, I'd like to volunteer as a pilot or pilot volunteer, and they'll have a protocol for trying to get you engaged. And if you're curious how we as pilots see missions, everybody has software that sort of looks like this. System. And I can go in and at any given moment pull up what missions need pilots. The little plus sign gives me information, detailed information on the patient, as well as any passengers that may be going. And I added that plus sign when I was in charge of technology because I went to an airport in Boston to pick up a young kid named Mason. He had 70% burns, and it's very difficult to walk up to that person. So now we make sure that everybody that's doing a flight is aware of the illness and they're not surprised when they go to pick them up. And it also lets you say, hey, I want to find burn patients or brain cancer patients or veterans or things like that. So you can really zero in on how you want to volunteer. And there's a similar version of this for people that want to drive people to and from airports. So again, I'm hard to go through very quickly because I know you guys have a short meeting time. The breadth and types of people that were flying is pretty impressive. This little girl here in the bottom left is the girl you saw in the video, and this picture on the right is her when she started. So I'm flying her next on May 1st, and she's having a heart valve replacement. So again, quite addictive. There's STEM flight education opportunities and other things that you can do here. So I can send you guys a presentation, but here's quick ways to go and take a look. If you wanted to do it with your cell phone now, you could quickly say, hey, I want to here, but we can available to you. And let's go through here. I didn't go over that. We do also transport things like blood. I set up a bone marrow transport program with Be the Match. When COVID started and all the commercial airlines stopped flying often, and we needed to figure out how to use private planes to do bone marrow transplant or transport. So I did the 2 first test flights, both of which were unusual because they were from Canada to the US. That worked out. Our typical planes are all over the place. It could be the slowest plane, or it could be, I fly a jet, and probably only 3 or 4% of us fly jets. The typical plane is probably here on the left, which you may recognize here, which is built up your way. A couple of examples of us as pilots. I'm actually very close to 400 missions now. And then Tim, who's a long time Rotary member, and his wife is on the board of international. This is just an example of these individual organizations that are out there. So anyways, I can stop now. The rest is just examples. And if I can see if you have any questions. I'll stop sharing if you guys don't want to see anything or don't have a question about one of the slides that I presented. Go there, share.
We are here. Are there
You're
any questions for Mark? Linda.
Mark, thank you for your presentation. Did you say you're in Massachusetts? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, I'm about 15 miles south of Boston.
Okay. So when you showed the map, it looked to me like there was nothing in Wisconsin. Am I understanding that correctly with that arrows?
Oh no, I just did that as an example.
Do you know the names? Do they fly out of the Waukesha County Airport?
They probably will fly out of everything because so what I had on there, and I can go back to it if you want or send it to you, but there was a slide that showed you 3 organizations that were in Wisconsin, that covered Wisconsin, and those will cover all of those airports. So if the Air Caroline's website has a section at the top where you can find groups based on state. But up here, for example, I'll fly an hour to upstate Maine. That's almost a 9-hour drive. And the airport has no tower, has 1 building. You don't necessarily want to use the restroom ever. We call it the rustic Maine condition. Airport, we try to get too offensive, but there are places where you land. There's no fuel, fairly usable little shack, and then you head back. So yeah, so if you can think of it as an airport and it's typically at least 2,500 feet long or 3,000 feet long, you know, it will get used.
Jim. Do you receive any consideration in the form of either free fuel or non-taxable fuel or anything that helps out in terms of the oil companies or anybody else?
Well, there's a couple of different programs out there. Phillips 66 has a discount program, which is a rebate that applies to only certain parts of the country. About 7 years ago now, we got an FAA waiver. The FAA doesn't want pilots, private pilots, to be paid for flying. They're very, very strict about it. So we needed to apply for a waiver to get permission to reimburse pilots for fuel. A number of the organizations have gone through the pain of that process, which has to be updated every single year to get the FAA to sign off on a reimbursement program. There are many different ways that that process works. Some of them are on the fringe of what the FAA said was legal, and some are right down the middle. So, so that was a long answer to a simple question. So the answer is maybe, depending on what organization is involved.
Any other questions? I will say, I know I used to have an airplane on at Waukesha back when I still had an airplane, and there were several pilots there, owner pilots that did Angel flight on a pretty regular basis. So they were.
Yep. The Angel Flight Central flies out of there fairly often. And one other thing that I can mention, if you are all the fees, so you're never charged a landing fee, a handling fee, and you can fly into Minneapolis, Boston Logan, or the smallest airport, but there will not be any fees. That's been worked on, rather adamantly over the years. And we have very good airport participation in waiving all those fees. And if you fly into something like called the Class Bravo, which is the busiest airport that category you can be in, like Minneapolis, they almost always give you special handling. They'll let you cut the line, they'll let you cut the corner. They do. Air traffic control is very, very supportive of all of these organizations. So it's great to see.
Hey, anybody online with questions?
We have Joe.
Hey, hi, good morning. Yeah, I had two questions. One of them already came up, but the other one has to do with insurance and liability. Or indemnified or somehow or another taken care of in case like your patient dies on the way to the hospital or there's a plane crash. How do you deal with that?
Okay, there's a couple of questions in there. So the first one is insurance. So there's three answers to that question. One is each organization requires their pilots to have a certain level of insurance, including liability. Number two is most of the larger organizations have general liability and require the patients to sign a liability release as part of their flight, getting access to a flight. And third is the FAA and one of Air Caroline's roles is to advocate for all these volunteer organizations. And we were successful in getting flights that are donated into the Good Samaritan legislation. So we're protected under that, like we're doing a Good Samaritan Act on the edge of the highway law. So that's generally how we all approach it. There's been very, very, very few incidents where passengers have been harmed by a flight. It's not a perfect process. We're flying a kind of, thing. But in general, the organizations have been well protected for doing this. I don't know of a passenger passing away in flight ever. There may have been one in the last 30, 40 years of doing this. I've been doing it for 12 years or 11 years now. Patients do get sick, and there's a vetting process before they're flown. They have to be ambulatory. There's a doctor's sign off that they're stable enough to fly. And sometimes we'll get conditions like it needs to be low altitude, so they can't fly above 4,000 feet. Obviously, and it feels like it's 6,000 feet. So if there's a 4,000-foot restriction by the doctor for some reason, we'll just fly low.
Any other?
Good question.
Anybody else online? Well, Mark, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for being in the first of the country to see this. And look forward to any feedback. Please send it my way. We appreciate getting it, and we're going to be fine-tuning the presentation before the international meeting in Melbourne. A number of pilots are going to that.
Okay. Well, Mark, in honor of your presenting to us this morning, one of Rotary's big projects is eradication of polio worldwide.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is donate enough funds to inoculate 50 children in your honor. So
Wow,
thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for joining us and getting up early to do that. We appreciate it.
I'm an hour ahead of you, so it wasn't as bad. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you.